I was lying in a hospital bed when my wife leaned over me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same one I bought her on our first anniversary. She looked me dead in the eyes, and I thought she was going to say she loved me. Instead, she whispered, "I can't do this anymore, Marcus. You're useless to me now." Then she walked out, just like that, left me paralyzed in more ways than one. That was 15 years ago, and I thought that chapter was closed. But some people don't stay gone. Some people come back when you finally find peace, and they bring hell with them. If you've ever been abandoned when you needed someone most, or if you've ever had to fight for the happiness you earned, you're going to feel this one deep. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're watching from. It matters to know I'm not alone in this, because for the longest time, I thought I was. My name is Marcus Hayes. I'm 72 years old now, but back when this story started, I was 57 and living in North Philadelphia with a wife I thought would be by my side forever. I was wrong, dead wrong. And what happened next broke me, rebuilt me, and then almost destroyed everything I'd fought to put back together. This is my story. Every word of it is true. I met Vanessa Turner at a church barbecue in the summer of 1993. She was 25, fresh out of graduate school, wearing a yellow sundress that caught every bit of sunlight that came through the trees. I was 43, a general contractor who'd spent the last 2 decades building houses and never quite building a life. My sister Lorraine had been trying to set me up for years, but I'd always said no. Then I saw Vanessa laughing with some kids near the grill, and something in me shifted. She had this energy, like she could light up a room just by walking into it. After the barbecue, I asked Lorraine who she was. 2 weeks later, we went on our first date to a jazz club in Center City. She ordered red wine, I ordered whiskey, and we talked until they kicked us out at closing time. We got married 14 months later in that same church where we met. It was a small wedding, maybe 60 people. Vanessa wanted something bigger, but I was old-fashioned. I wanted it to mean something more than just a show. My best man was my cousin Jerome, who'd known me since we were kids running around West Philly getting into trouble. Vanessa's maid of honor was her college roommate, some woman named Diane, who I only met twice and didn't much care for. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the way Vanessa looked at me when the pastor said, "You may kiss your bride." Like I was the only man in the world. Like we were going to make it. We honeymooned in Miami for 5 days. We stayed in a little hotel near South Beach, ate Cuban food, danced in the rain one night when a storm rolled in. I remember thinking, I waited my whole life for this. For her. For us. When we got back to Philly, we moved into a brick row home in Germantown that I'd renovated myself. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a backyard just big enough for a garden. Vanessa planted tomatoes and sunflowers that first spring. I built her a little bench under the oak tree so she could sit out there in the evenings. She worked as a guidance counselor at a middle school, and I kept running my contracting business. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Some mornings I'd wake up and watch her sleep, and I'd thank God for giving me a second chance at happiness. I'd been alone for so long that having someone to come home to felt like a miracle. She'd make me coffee before I left for work sites, and I'd leave her little notes on the fridge. Stupid stuff. Love you, V. Don't work too hard. Things married people do when they're still figuring each other out. But marriage ain't a honeymoon. That's the thing they don't tell you. The first year was easy. The second year, cracks started to show. Little things at first. Vanessa wanted to go out more. Dinners, parties, trips. I was happy staying home, watching TV, working in the yard. She'd complain that I was boring, that I didn't have any ambition beyond building houses. I'd tell her I was 57 years old and tired, that I'd earned the right to slow down. She'd roll her eyes and say something sharp, and we'd go to bed mad. But we always made up. We always found our way back. At least, I thought we did. I didn't see what was really happening. I didn't see that she was getting restless, that she was looking at me and seeing an old man instead of her husband. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked her what was wrong instead of assuming everything was fine. But I didn't, and that's on me. The accident happened on a Tuesday morning in October 2008. I was driving to a job site in Ardmore, a big renovation for some lawyer who wanted his whole kitchen redone. It was raining, one of those cold, heavy rains that make the roads slick and dangerous. I was going through an intersection on City Avenue when a delivery truck ran a red light and slammed into the driver's side of my truck. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the sound of metal crushing or the airbag deploying. What I remember is waking up 3 days later in a hospital bed at Penn Presbyterian with tubes coming out of my arms and my wife standing by the window, staring out at the parking lot. She wasn't crying. She wasn't praying. She was just standing there. When I tried to say her name, nothing came out. My mouth wouldn't work right. My body wouldn't work right. The doctor came in a few minutes later and told me I'd fractured 3 vertebrae in my spine. They'd done emergency surgery, but there was swelling around my spinal cord. They didn't know if I'd ever walk again. The first month in that hospital bed, I kept thinking it was temporary. The doctor said the swelling would go down. They said there was a chance, a good chance, that I'd regain some movement. Physical therapy, they said. Time and patience. But time in a hospital bed ain't the same as time in the real world. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours stretch into days. And the whole time, you're lying there wondering if this is it, if this is how the rest of your life is going to be. Vanessa visited every day for the first 2 weeks. She'd sit in the chair by the window, scrolling through her phone, sometimes reading a magazine. She didn't talk much. When she did, it was surface stuff. The weather's getting colder. I called your sister. The insurance company keeps calling. She never said, I love you. She never said, we're going to get through this. And I didn't push her. I figured she was scared. Hell, I was scared. They moved me to a rehab facility in Roxborough after 6 weeks. It was a depressing place. Pale green walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant and old age everywhere. I shared a room with a man named Floyd who'd had a stroke and couldn't speak. He'd just sit there in his wheelchair, staring at the TV with the sound off. I tried to stay positive. I did the physical therapy exercises even when they hurt so bad I wanted to scream. I worked with the occupational therapist, learning how to transfer from the bed to the wheelchair without help. I told myself this was just a chapter, not the whole book. But every night, when the lights went out and Floyd was snoring across the room, I'd lie there in the dark and wonder if Vanessa was lying awake too. Wondering the same thing I was wondering. How much longer can we do this? She started visiting less. 3 times a week, then twice, then once. She'd come on Sunday afternoons, stay for maybe 30 minutes, and leave. She stopped asking how therapy was going. She stopped bringing me anything from home. No pictures, no books, nothing to make that sterile room feel less like a prison. One Sunday in December, she didn't show up at all. I called her cell phone 4 times, no answer. When she finally came the next week, I asked her where she'd been. She said she'd been tired. Tired of what? I asked. She didn't answer, just looked at me with these cold eyes like I was a stranger, like I was something she had to deal with instead of someone she'd chosen to marry. That's when I knew. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. She was done. She was just waiting for the right time to say it. The accident had messed with my brain too. That's what the neurologist told me. Traumatic brain injury, they called it. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to slow things down. My memory was foggy. I'd forget conversations we'd had the day before. Sometimes I'd call Vanessa by the wrong name, call her Teresa instead, which was my childhood friend's name. Vanessa hated that. She'd snap at me, say I wasn't even trying. But I was trying. God, I was trying so hard. Every day I'd wake up and do the exercises. Every day I'd push through the pain and the exhaustion and the fog in my head. I kept telling myself that if I could just get back on my feet, if I could just walk again, everything would go back to normal. Vanessa would smile at me again. She'd kiss me goodnight again. We'd go back to being Marcus and Vanessa, the couple who danced in the rain in Miami. But normal was gone, and I didn't even realize it yet. One night in January, she came to visit after her shift at the school. It was snowing outside, one of those quiet snows where everything feels muffled and far away. She sat down in the chair, didn't take off her coat. I could tell something was different. She wouldn't look at me. just kept staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. "Marcus," she said, and her voice was flat, empty, "I need to tell you something." My heart started pounding. I knew what was coming, but I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to tell her to stop, to leave, to come back when she could lie to me a little better. But I didn't. I just waited. She looked up at me, and there were no tears, no emotion at all. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I thought I could, but I can't. You're not the man I married. She stopped, swallowed. "You're useless to me now." Those words hit harder than the truck that broke my spine. Useless. Like I was a tool that didn't work anymore. Like I was trash. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the door. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to beg her to stay, but all I could do was watch her leave. After Vanessa walked, I stopped doing the physical therapy. What was the point? I stopped talking to the nurses. I stopped answering my sister's phone calls. For 3 weeks, I just lay there in that bed staring at the ceiling, wishing I'd died in the accident. It would have been easier that way. Cleaner. No one tells you what it's like to lose your wife and your body at the same time. No one tells you how to come back from that kind of darkness. Floyd tried to talk to me once. Well, he tried. He pointed at the TV, then pointed at me, like he was saying, "You gonna be okay?" I shook my head. I wasn't gonna be okay. I was 59 years old, stuck in a wheelchair, abandoned by the woman I loved, and barely able to remember what day it was. I'd lost everything that mattered. Then Teresa showed up. I hadn't seen Teresa Walker in almost 30 years. We grew up together in West Philly, same neighborhood, same streets. She lived 2 doors down from my grandmother's house, and we'd been best friends from the time we were 7 until the summer after high school when she moved to Atlanta for college. We wrote letters for a while. Then life got busy, and we lost touch. I'd heard through the grapevine that she'd gotten married, had kids, got divorced, moved back to Philly a few years ago, but I never reached out. Didn't seem right, me being married and all. But somehow, and I still don't know how, she found out about the accident. My sister Lorraine must have told someone who told someone who told Teresa. That's how it works in our neighborhood. Everybody knows everybody's business. She walked into my room on a Thursday afternoon in late January, carrying a bag of tasty cakes and a thermos of coffee. "Marcus Hayes," she said, standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips. "You look like hell." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in 2 months. Teresa looked older, we both did, but she still had that same spark in her eyes. She was 61, her hair was gray now, cut short, and she had wrinkles around her mouth from smiling too much. She pulled up a chair, opened the tasty cakes, and handed me one. "Butterscotch crimpets," she said. "Still your favorite?" I nodded. We didn't talk about Vanessa. We didn't talk about the accident. We just sat there eating crimpets and drinking coffee, and for the first time since the truck hit me, I didn't feel completely alone. She came back the next day, and the day after that. She'd bring food, magazines, crossword puzzles. She'd tell me stories about her kids, 2 grown sons, one in the Army, one teaching high school in Wilmington. She'd tell me about her job working at the post office, about her neighbors, about the stray cat that kept showing up on her porch. Just normal stuff, life stuff, the kind of stuff that makes you remember the world still turning even when yours has stopped. Teresa didn't pity me. That's what I loved about her. She didn't look at me like I was broken. One day, about 3 weeks after she started visiting, she came in and found me still in bed at 2 in the afternoon. The physical therapist had come by earlier, but I'd refused to work with her. Teresa didn't say a word. She just walked over to the bed, yanked the blanket off me, and said, "Get up." I told her I couldn't. She said, "You mean you won't?" We stared at each other for a long minute. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Marcus, I didn't come all the way across town to watch you die in this bed. You're better than this. And if you don't believe that, I'll believe it for both of us until you do." Something in her voice, something fierce and loving at the same time, cracked something open inside me. I let her help me into the wheelchair. She wheeled me down to the therapy room herself, sat there the whole session, and when I wanted to quit halfway through, she just shook her head and said, "Not yet." After that, I started trying again. Not for me, for her. because Teresa showed up every single day, and I couldn't let her down. She'd be there at 2 o'clock on the dot, and we'd go to therapy together. She'd push me when I wanted to give up. She'd celebrate when I could move my leg an inch, when I could stand for 5 seconds, when I could take one step with the walker. The doctors said it was a miracle. They said the brain injury had been healing faster than they expected, that the connection between my brain and my spine was repairing itself. They said if I kept working, I might walk again. Might. That word hung over everything, but Teresa didn't deal in might. She dealt in will. You will walk again, she'd say. You will get out of here. You will have a life. And slowly, painfully, I started to believe her. One night in March, after a particularly brutal therapy session, Teresa and I were sitting outside the facility. It was one of those early spring nights where you could just barely feel the warmth coming back into the air. She handed me a styrofoam cup of hot chocolate from the vending machine. We sat there in silence for a while, watching cars pass on the street. Then she said, "I missed you, Marcus, all those years." I looked at her, surprised. She smiled. "I know we were just kids, but you were my best friend. And when I heard what happened to you, when I heard your wife left." She trailed off, shook her head. "I couldn't stay away. I couldn't let you go through this alone." I didn't know what to say, so I just reached over and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, and in that moment, sitting in the parking lot of a rehab facility in Roxborough, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not the fragile, desperate kind, the real kind. The kind that says, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe this is just the middle. By May, I could stand on my own for 2 minutes. By June, I could walk 10 feet with a walker. By July, I was taking steps without it. Slow, shaky steps, but steps. The doctors were amazed. They kept using words like remarkable recovery and against the odds. But I knew the truth. It wasn't just the therapy or the medication or the surgery. It was Teresa. She was there every single day, even when I was mean to her, even when I told her to leave me alone, even when I cried like a child because the pain was too much. She never left. And somewhere along the way, something shifted between us. It wasn't friendship anymore. It was more. It was love. The kind of love that grows slow and steady, built on showing up and holding on when everything else falls apart. I got discharged from the rehab facility in late August. Teresa helped me move into a small apartment in Mount Airy. Vanessa and I had never officially divorced. She just disappeared. Stopped answering my calls, moved out of the house in Germantown, left no forwarding address. My lawyer said I could file for abandonment, but I didn't have the energy to fight. I just wanted to move forward. The apartment was on the first floor, 1 bedroom, a little kitchen, a living room with a window that looked out onto the street. Teresa helped me unpack, bought me groceries, set up my medications. She didn't make a big deal out of it. She just did it. That first night in the apartment, she made spaghetti and we ate on the couch, watching an old Western on TV. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Being home?" I thought about it. "Feels like starting over," I said. She smiled. "Good. That's exactly what it is." We started spending more time together. She'd come over after work, and we'd cook dinner or take walks around the neighborhood. I was still using a cane, but I was walking. Really walking. Teresa had a garden in her backyard, and she taught me how to grow vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, green beans. We'd sit out there in the evenings, pulling weeds, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her marriage, how it had fallen apart after 15 years because her ex-husband had cheated with a coworker. She told me about raising her sons alone, working double shifts at the post office to keep them fed and clothed. She told me about the loneliness of being divorced at 50, how hard it was to start over when everyone around you seemed to have it figured out. I told her about Vanessa, about how I thought we were happy, about the accident, the hospital, the words that still echoed in my head. "You're useless to me now." Teresa listened without judgment. She was scared, Teresa said one night. "That doesn't make it right, but people run when they're scared. You didn't. You stayed and fought. That's the difference between you and her." In October, almost 2 years after the accident, I asked Teresa to dinner, a real dinner. Not spaghetti on the couch, but a restaurant downtown with candles and wine and a tablecloth. She wore a blue dress, and I wore the only suit I owned. We talked for 3 hours. We laughed. We held hands across the table. When I drove her home, yeah, I was driving again. The doctors had cleared me. I walked her to her door and kissed her. It was soft and tentative, like we were teenagers again. She pulled back, looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I've been waiting 40 years for you to do that." I laughed. "I'm sorry it took so long." We started dating officially after that. It felt strange at first, calling her my girlfriend at 61 years old, but it felt right too. She knew everything about me, the broken parts, the scared parts, the parts I'd hidden from Vanessa, and she loved me anyway, not in spite of who I was, but because of it. By December, I knew I wanted to marry her. I didn't have much to offer, a small apartment, a body that still ached on cold days, a past that was messy and complicated. But I had love. Real love. The kind that shows up every day. The kind that doesn't run when things get hard. On Christmas Eve, I took Teresa back to the park where we used to play as kids. It was snowing lightly, and the park was empty. I got down on one knee, carefully, because my balance still wasn't perfect, and pulled out a ring I'd bought with money I'd saved from a small contracting job I'd taken on. It wasn't fancy, just a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Teresa Walker," I said, "you saved my life, not just from the wheelchair, but from giving up. You reminded me what it means to be loved. Will you marry me?" She didn't even hesitate. "Yes," she said, pulling me to my feet. "Yes, yes, yes." We got married at City Hall in February 2011, 3 years after the accident. It was just us, my sister Lorraine, Teresa's 2 sons, and a clerk who'd done this 1,000 times, but still smiled like she believed in love. Teresa wore a cream-colored dress and carried daisies. I wore my suit and cried when they pronounced us husband and wife. We didn't have a honeymoon. We just went back to our apartment now, and made dinner together. That night, lying in bed with Teresa next to me, I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything, and how against all odds I'd found something better, something real. I thought the hard part was over. I thought we'd earned our peace. I had no idea that the past was about to come knocking, and this time it wasn't going to leave without a fight. Life with Teresa was quiet, simple. The kind of simple I'd been chasing my whole life without realizing it. We'd wake up early, have coffee on the little balcony, watch the neighborhood come alive. I'd taken on a few small contracting jobs. Nothing major, but enough to keep busy and bring in some money. Teresa worked her shifts at the post office, and we'd meet for lunch when we could. Weekends, we'd visit her sons, go to church, work in the garden. It was ordinary. Beautiful. I was 63 years old, and for the first time since the accident, I felt like a whole person again. Not the man I used to be, but someone new. Someone who'd been broken and put back together with stronger glue. I think about Vanessa sometimes. Wonder where she was, if she ever thought about me. But it didn't hurt anymore. She was a chapter I'd closed. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday in June 2013 when she showed up. I was working on a deck repair for a neighbor down the street, hammering in new boards, sweating in the summer heat. Teresa was at work. I heard a car pull up, but I didn't look. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. "Marcus?" I froze, turned around, and there she was. Vanessa, standing at the edge of the yard, wearing jeans and a white blouse, her hair shorter than I remembered. She looked older, tired. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, a hardness in her face that made her look like a stranger. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. She stepped closer. "I heard you were walking again. I heard you got married." She said it like an accusation, like I'd done something wrong. "Yeah," I said, "I did." She looked at the house, at the half-finished deck, at me standing there with a hammer in my hand. "I wanted to talk to you," she said. "Can we go somewhere?" I told her no. Told her whatever she needed to say. She could say it right there. She glanced around like she was worried someone might hear. Then she said, "I made a mistake, Marcus, leaving you. I was scared. I was overwhelmed. I thought you'd never walk again, and I couldn't handle it. But I never stopped loving you." I stared at her, couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You told me I was useless," I said. "You left me in that bed and never came back." She shook her head. "I was giving you space to heal. I thought if I stayed away, you'd get better faster." "And you did. Look at you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I want to come back, Marcus. I want to fix this. We're still married. Legally. We never got divorced. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. You can't be serious, I said. She stepped even closer. I am. I'm 40 years old. I've been alone for 5 years. I made mistakes, but I'm ready now, ready to be the wife you needed me to be. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. Vanessa, I said, keeping my voice steady, I'm married to Teresa. We have a life together. You don't get to walk back in after 5 years and act like nothing happened. Her face changed. The softness disappeared, replaced by something cold and sharp. We're still married, she repeated. That marriage to Teresa isn't legal. You're committing bigamy. I felt my hands start to shake. I'll file for divorce, I said. I should have done it years ago. She crossed her arms. And what if I don't sign? I blinked. What? She smiled, and it was the ugliest smile I'd ever seen. You can't divorce me without my consent, Marcus, and I'm not giving it. If I can't have you, she can't either. Then she turned and walked back to her car, got in, and drove away. I stood there in the yard, the hammer still in my hand, the sun beating down on my neck, and felt the ground shift under my feet. I didn't tell Teresa right away. I didn't know how. How do you tell your wife that the woman you thought was gone forever just showed up and claimed she was still legally married to you? How do you explain that your past just became your present without warning? I spent the rest of the day working on that deck, trying to push Vanessa's words out of my head, but they kept circling back. We're still married. If I can't have you, she can't either. When Teresa came home that evening, she found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. Baby, what's wrong? She asked, sitting down next to me. I told her everything. I watched her face go from confused to shocked to angry. She can't do that, Teresa said. She can't just claim you're still married after abandoning you for 5 years. I pulled out my phone, called my lawyer, a guy named Dennis I'd used for business contracts. Left a message. We'll figure this out, Teresa said, taking my hand. She's bluffing. She has to be. But Vanessa wasn't bluffing. Dennis called back the next day and confirmed my worst fear. Vanessa and I were still legally married. I'd never filed for divorce because I'd been too busy surviving, and she'd never filed either. My marriage to Teresa, while real in every way that mattered, wasn't legally recognized. Dennis said we could file for divorce on the grounds of abandonment, that we had a strong case, but it would take time. And Vanessa would have to sign the papers. What if she refuses? I asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then we go to court, Dennis said. But that could take months, maybe longer. I hung up and looked at Teresa. She was standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself. I'm so sorry. She turned to me, and her eyes were wet. This isn't your fault, Marcus. None of this is your fault. But it felt like my fault. It felt like every choice I'd ever made had led us to this moment. And now the woman I loved, the woman who'd saved me, was paying the price for my past. Vanessa started showing up everywhere. At first, it was just drive-bys. I'd be working in the yard, and her car would roll past slowly, like she was surveying what I'd built without her. Then she started parking across the street, sitting there for hours, watching the house. Teresa would look out the window and see her there, and I'd watch my wife's shoulders tense up like she was waiting for something terrible to happen. One morning in July, Teresa was leaving for work, and Vanessa got out of her car and walked right up to her. I was inside making breakfast. Didn't see it happen until Teresa came back in, her hands shaking, her face pale. She called me a homewrecker, Teresa said, her voice barely above a whisper. She said I stole her husband, that I knew you were married and didn't care. I felt rage flood through me, hot and sharp. I headed for the door, but Teresa grabbed my arm. Don't, she said. That's what she wants. She wants you to react, to give her ammunition. But it was hard. God, it was hard to watch this woman I loved being harassed by a ghost from my past. Dennis filed the divorce papers in August. Abandonment, he called it. 5 years of no contact, no support, no communication. Open and shut case, he said. Except Vanessa had hired a lawyer too, some guy named Richard Pelham, who worked out of a fancy office downtown and charged $300 an hour. How Vanessa was paying for him, I had no idea. She'd worked as a guidance counselor, and unless something had changed, she wasn't exactly rolling in money. Pelham sent back a response to our filing. Vanessa contested the divorce. She claimed she'd been in contact with me the whole time, that she'd sent letters and cards I'd never responded to. It was a lie. A complete fabrication. But now we had to prove it was a lie, and that meant more time, more money, more stress. Teresa and I started arguing over little things. Not about Vanessa. We both knew she was the enemy. But about dishes left in the sink, bills that needed paying, whose turn it was to go to the grocery store. Stress does that. It finds the cracks and widens them. One Sunday in September, Teresa and I went to church like we always did. We sat in our usual spot, third pew from the front on the left side. Halfway through the sermon, the doors at the back of the sanctuary opened. I didn't turn around. You're not supposed to. It's disrespectful. But I felt it. That prickle on the back of your neck when you know someone's watching you. After the service, we were standing outside talking to Pastor Williams when I saw her, Vanessa, standing by the oak tree near the parking lot, wearing a dress I remembered buying her years ago. She waved, smiled, like we were old friends. Teresa saw her too. "Let's go," she said, tugging my arm. But Vanessa walked over anyway, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Marcus," she said, ignoring Teresa completely. "It's good to see you. You look well." I didn't respond. Pastor Williams, bless him, stepped between us. "Is there something I can help you with, sister?" he asked Vanessa. She looked at him, then at me, then at Teresa. "I'm his wife," she said. "I just wanted to see my husband." Teresa didn't say a word. She just walked to the car. I followed her, leaving Vanessa standing there with Pastor Williams looking confused. On the drive home, Teresa stared out the window. "She's not going to stop," she said. "She's going to keep doing this until we break." I reached over and took her hand. "We're not going to break," I said, but I didn't sound convincing, even to myself. That night, lying in bed, Teresa asked me something she'd never asked before. "Do you still love her?" I turned to look at her, shocked. "What? No, Teresa, no. I love you. Only you." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "She was your wife for 2 years. I was your friend for 2 years as a kid, then gone for 30. How do I compete with that?" I pulled her close. "You're not competing," I said. "You already won. You stayed. She left. That's the difference." But Vanessa had planted a seed of doubt, and I could feel it growing between us like a weed. In October, Dennis called with bad news. The judge had granted Vanessa a hearing. We'd have to go to court in November and make our case for divorce. Pelham was claiming that Vanessa had been trying to reconcile, that I'd refused her attempts, and that she deserved a chance to save the marriage. It was insane. Twisted. But it was legal. "This is going to get ugly," Dennis warned. "Pelham's going to try to paint you as the one who abandoned the marriage, not her. He's going to bring up your relationship with Teresa while you were still legally married to Vanessa." I felt sick. "But Teresa and I didn't start dating until after Vanessa left," I said. "I know that," Dennis said. "But the optics aren't great. You were still married on paper." I hung up and sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands. Teresa came in, saw me there, and didn't ask what was wrong. She just sat down next to me and put her head on my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, not talking, just breathing together. Outside, the leaves were falling from the trees, and I thought about how everything that grows eventually dies. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it grows back stronger in the spring. I just hoped we'd make it to spring. The hearing was on a gray November morning, the kind where the sky looks like it might crack open and pour rain any second. Teresa and I arrived at the courthouse at 8:30, Dennis meeting us at the entrance with his briefcase and a grim expression. "Remember," he said, "answer the questions honestly, and don't let Pelham bait you. He's going to try to make you angry." We walked through the metal detectors, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom. Vanessa arrived at 8:45 with Pelham, a tall white man in an expensive suit with silver hair and a smile that made my skin crawl. Vanessa wore a conservative navy dress and looked nervous. Good, I thought. She should be nervous. At 9, they called us in. The judge was a black woman in her 50s named Judge Harrison. She looked tired, like she'd seen 1,000 cases just like this one and didn't have patience for games. "Let's keep this civil," she said, looking at both lawyers. "I want facts, not theatrics." Dennis went first. He laid out the timeline: the accident in October 2008, Vanessa's visits to the hospital that became less frequent, her disappearance in January 2009. He presented hospital records showing I'd had no visitors after January except for Teresa starting in late January. He showed phone records proving I'd called Vanessa dozens of times with no response. He presented testimony from my sister Lorraine, who tried to contact Vanessa after she left and found her number disconnected, her email bouncing back. Mr. Hayes was abandoned at his most vulnerable moment, Dennis said. His wife walked out when he was paralyzed, confused, and fighting for his life. She has no claim to this marriage now. Judge Harrison listened, taking notes. Then it was Pelham's turn. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and started painting a completely different picture. Your Honor, he said, Mrs. Hayes was a young woman married to a much older man. When the accident happened, she was 27 years old. She stayed by his side for months, but the emotional and financial toll became overwhelming. She needed space to process her trauma. I almost laughed out loud. Her trauma? Pelham kept going. He claimed Vanessa had sent letters to the rehab facility that I'd never responded to. He claimed she'd called the apartment after I was discharged, but I'd hung up on her. He claimed she'd driven by the house multiple times wanting to reconcile, but had seen me with Teresa and decided to respect my new relationship. It was all lies, every word. But Pelham said it with such confidence, such authority, that I could see Judge Harrison's expression shift. She was listening, considering. When Pelham sat down, Dennis stood up for rebuttal. Your Honor, Mr. Black Hayes has no record of any letters. The rehab facility has no record of any letters. Mrs. Hayes cannot produce copies of these alleged letters because they don't exist. As for phone calls, again, no records. This is a fabrication designed to delay an inevitable divorce and continue harassing Mr. Hayes and his current partner. Pelham objected. Mrs. Hayes is not harassing anyone. She's simply exercising her legal rights as Mr. Hayes' wife. Then Judge Harrison did something I wasn't expecting. She looked at Vanessa. Mrs. Hayes, she said, you're telling me you tried to reconcile with your husband for 5 years, but you have no proof of any of these attempts? Vanessa stood up. I didn't keep copies of the letters, Your Honor. I didn't think I'd need them. And the phone calls, they were from my cell phone, but I've changed numbers since then. Judge Harrison leaned back in her chair. Convenient, she said dryly. Mr. Black Hayes, I'd like to hear from you. Why did you wait so long to file for divorce? Dennis motioned for me to stand. My legs felt shaky, but I stood. Your Honor, I said, I didn't file because I was trying to survive. I was in physical therapy for 18 months. I was dealing with a brain injury. I didn't have the mental or emotional capacity to think about divorce papers. And honestly, I thought she'd already moved on. I thought maybe she'd filed and I just didn't know about it. Judge Harrison nodded. And when did you begin your relationship with Ms. Walker? I glanced at Teresa, who was sitting in the gallery. We reconnected in January 2009, but we didn't start dating until October 2010, almost 2 years after Vanessa left. Judge Harrison wrote something down. Then she looked at Pelham. Does your client contest that timeline? Pelham whispered something to Vanessa. She shook her head. No, Your Honor, Pelham said, but we maintain that Mr. Hayes never gave Mrs. Hayes a chance to reconcile. Judge Harrison held up a hand. Mr. Pelham, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a delay tactic when I see one. Your client had 5 years to file for divorce herself if she believed the marriage was over. She didn't. She waited until Mr. Hayes had rebuilt his life, and now she's contesting his attempt to move forward. That speaks to motive. She paused. However, I can't grant a divorce without Mrs. Hayes' consent or proof of irreconcilable abandonment. Mr. Hayes, I'm giving you 60 days to gather more evidence. Mrs. Hayes, I'm giving you 60 days to either sign the divorce papers or provide concrete proof of your reconciliation attempts. We'll reconvene in January. She banged the gavel. The hearing was over. Outside the courthouse, Teresa was waiting by the car. I walked over expecting her to ask how it went, but she just wrapped her arms around me and held on tight. It's not over, I said into her hair. I know, she whispered, but we're still here. We're still standing. Vanessa came out of the courthouse a few minutes later. She didn't look at us, just got in Pelham's car and drove away. Dennis patted me on the shoulder. We'll find more evidence, he said. Don't worry. But I was worried because I realized something in that courtroom. Vanessa wasn't here because she loved me. She was here because she had nothing else. And people with nothing to lose are the most dangerous kind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the judge's words. Proof of irreconcilable abandonment. How do you prove someone abandoned you when they're standing right there claiming they never did? Teresa finally sat up in bed around 2 in the morning. What are you thinking about? She asked. I'm thinking, I said, that we need to find out what happened to Vanessa, where she's been, what she's been doing, because something's not adding up. Finding out the truth about Vanessa wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. My cousin Jerome still had connections all over Philadelphia, people who knew things. I called him up the day after the hearing and asked if he could dig around. What am I looking for? He asked. Anything, I said. Where she's been living, who she's been with, why she's broke enough to need legal help but can afford a $300 an hour lawyer. Jerome said he'd see what he could find. A week later, he called me back. You're not going to like this, he said. I told him I didn't care. I needed to know. He met me at a diner in West Philly on a Tuesday afternoon. Slid an envelope across the table. Inside were printouts, social media posts, court records, an eviction notice. Your ex-wife's been busy, Jerome said. After she left you, she moved to Atlanta. Lived with a man named Dwayne Porter for 2 years. He was some kind of regional manager for a hotel chain. She quit her job at the school, played housewife for a while. Then Dwayne found out she was still married to you. They had a fight. He kicked her out, and she moved back to Philly in 2012. I stared at the papers. There were photos. Vanessa at parties, Vanessa on vacation, Vanessa looking young and carefree while I was learning how to walk again. After she came back to Philly, Jerome continued, she moved in with her sister in Nicetown. Got a job as a substitute teacher, but it didn't last. Got fired for showing up late too many times. She's been bouncing around since then, waiting tables, working retail, getting evicted from apartments. She's broke, Marcus, and she's 40 years old with no prospects. I looked up at him. So why come back to me? Jerome shrugged. Desperation. She's got no job, no man, no stability. You're probably the only person she knows with anything, a house, a steady life, someone who might take her back out of guilt or obligation. I felt cold. She doesn't want me, I said. She wants security. Jerome nodded. And she'll burn your life down to get it. I showed the evidence to Dennis. He looked through it, nodding slowly. This is good, he said. This shows a pattern of instability and manipulation, but we need something more concrete for the judge, proof that she had no intention of reconciling until recently. I asked him what he meant. We need someone who will testify that she told them she had no interest in you, he said. An ex-boyfriend, a friend, her sister, someone. I thought about it. Vanessa's sister, Monica, had never liked me. She thought I was too old for Vanessa from the start. But maybe, just maybe, she'd be willing to tell the truth. I got Monica's number from Jerome and called her that night. She answered on the third ring. Marcus, she said, surprised. It's been a long time. I asked if we could meet. She hesitated. What's this about? I told her it was about Vanessa. There was a long pause. Then she said, Yeah, I think we need to talk. Monica met me at a coffee shop in Germantown the next day. She looked like an older, harder version of Vanessa. Same cheekbones, same eyes, but with gray streaks in her hair and a wariness that came from carrying too much for too long. We sat down, and she didn't waste time. Vanessa's been staying with me on and off for the last 2 years, she said. And I'm done. She's entitled, selfish, and she blames everyone but herself for where she ended up. I asked her what she meant. Monica sighed. When she left you, she told me you were a burden, that she married you, thinking you'd take care of her, and then the accident happened and you became useless. Those were her words. Useless. She said she deserved better than being stuck with a crippled old man. I felt like I'd been punched. Hearing it from Monica made it real in a way it hadn't been before. She went to Atlanta thinking she'd hit the jackpot with Dwayne, Monica continued. But when he found out she was still married, he dropped her. She's been bitter ever since. Why is she doing this now? I asked. Why come back after 5 years and pretend she wants me back? Monica looked me straight in the eye. Because she heard you were married. She heard you were walking again, working again, happy again. And it killed her. She couldn't stand that you moved on without her. So she decided if she couldn't have you, she'd make sure no one else could either. That's who my sister is. She's always been that way. If she can't win, she'll make everyone else lose. I asked Monica if she'd testify to that in court. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. Someone needs to stop her before she destroys your life again. We shook hands, and I left that coffee shop feeling like I'd finally found the weapon I needed. But I also felt something else. Sadness. Because Vanessa had chosen this. She'd chosen bitterness and revenge over healing and moving forward, and now she was going to pay for it. That night, I told Teresa everything. About Dwayne, about Atlanta, about Monica's testimony. Teresa listened quietly, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold. When I finished, she said, "I feel sorry for her." I was surprised. Sorry? After everything she's done? Teresa nodded. She's 40 years old and alone. She destroyed her own life, and now she's trying to destroy ours because she can't stand to see us happy. That's sad, Marcus. That's a sad way to live. I realized Teresa was right. Vanessa wasn't the villain of this story. She was the tragedy. But that didn't mean I was going to let her win. The next court date was in January. Dennis had everything ready. Jerome's findings, Monica's testimony, the proof that Vanessa had lied about trying to reconcile. This is it, Dennis said. After this, the judge will have to grant the divorce. Vanessa won't have a leg to stand on. But 2 weeks before the hearing, something happened that changed everything. Vanessa showed up at Teresa's job. Teresa worked at the post office on Broad Street, same one she'd been at for 20 years. It was a Thursday afternoon in late December, 3 days before Christmas. Teresa was sorting packages in the back when one of her coworkers came and told her someone was asking for her at the front counter. Teresa assumed it was me. I'd sometimes stop by on her lunch break to bring her food. But when she walked out front, it was Vanessa. Standing there in the middle of the post office, holding a manila envelope, looking nervous and desperate. "We need to talk," Vanessa said. Teresa's supervisor, a woman named Gloria, stepped forward. "Ma'am, if you're not here for postal business, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Vanessa ignored her. "Teresa, please, just 5 minutes." Teresa looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in Vanessa's eyes that made her stomach drop. Fear. Vanessa was scared. "Outside," Teresa said. 5 minutes. They walked out to the sidewalk. It was cold, the kind of cold that bites through your coat and settles in your bones. Vanessa handed Teresa the envelope. "What is this?" Teresa asked. "Medical records," Vanessa said. Her voice was shaking. "I have ovarian cancer, stage 3. I found out 3 months ago." Teresa felt the world tilt. "What does this have to do with Marcus?" Vanessa looked away. "I don't have health insurance. I lost my job. I lost my insurance, and I can't afford treatment. If Marcus and I are still married, I can get on his insurance. I can get the treatment I need." Teresa stared at her. "So this whole thing, the court case, the harassment, showing up at our house and our church, it was all so you could get health insurance?" Vanessa started crying. "I'm dying. I don't have anyone else. My sister won't help me. My ex-boyfriend won't help me. Marcus is the only person I'm legally tied to. Please, I don't want to die." Teresa stood there on that freezing sidewalk, holding medical records for a woman who tried to destroy her marriage and felt something crack open inside her. Pity, anger, grief, all at once. "You should have just asked," Teresa said. "You should have called Marcus and told him the truth instead of lying and manipulating and making our lives hell." Vanessa wiped her face. "Would he have helped me? After what I did to him?" Teresa didn't answer because she didn't know. When Teresa got home that night, she showed me the envelope. I read through the medical records, diagnosis, prognosis, treatment options, costs. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Without insurance, Vanessa couldn't afford it. She'd die. I put the papers down and looked at Teresa. "What do we do?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know." We sat there in silence for a long time. Then I said, "She's still a human being. She's still someone I made vows to, even if she broke them. I can't just let her die." Teresa looked at me with tears in her eyes. "If you help her, she wins. She gets what she wants. She gets to be your wife again, legally. And I'm just, what? What? The woman you live with?" I took her hands. You are my wife in every way that matters. You are my wife. A piece of paper doesn't change that. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't enough. I called Dennis that night and told him about the cancer. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, "Marcus, I need to be real with you. If you agree to stay married to Vanessa so she can get insurance, you're opening yourself up to a world of legal complications. She could claim spousal support. She could make claims on your assets. She could drag this out for years." I asked him what my other options were. "Let the divorce go through," he said. "She made her choices. You don't owe her anything." But that's the thing about being human. Sometimes you owe people things even when they don't deserve it. Sometimes mercy isn't about what's deserved. It's about who you are. I called Vanessa's number. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus?" Her voice was small, scared. "I saw the medical records," I said. "I'm sorry you're going through this." She started crying. "I'm so sorry," she said, "for everything, for leaving you, for lying, for making your life hell. I was wrong. I know that now." I closed my eyes. "I'm not going to let you die, Vanessa, but I'm also not going to let you destroy my marriage to Teresa. Here's what's going to happen. I'll put you on my insurance. You'll get your treatment, but you will sign the divorce papers the second you're in remission. And until then, you stay away from me and Teresa. You don't come to our house. You don't show up at our jobs. You don't call unless it's an emergency. Do you understand?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Yes. Thank you. God, Marcus. Thank you." I hung up and sat there feeling like I just made either the best or worst decision of my life. When I told Teresa what I decided, she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just nodded. "That's who you are," she said. "You're a good man, even when people don't deserve your goodness." I pulled her close. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry you have to share me with her, even just on paper." Teresa kissed my forehead. "I'm not sharing you," she said. "I have you. All of you. She just has a piece of paper." But over the next few weeks, I watched that piece of paper take its toll on Teresa. She became quieter, distant. She'd smile when I came home, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. One night in February, I found her crying in the kitchen. "What if she never signs the papers?" she asked. "What if she gets better and decides she wants to stay married to you? What if I lose you because you were trying to do the right thing?" I didn't have an answer, because that fear lived in me too. Vanessa started her treatment in January. Chemotherapy, surgery, radiation. I paid for it all through my insurance. I visited her once in the hospital after her surgery, not because I wanted to, but because she had no one else. She looked small in that hospital bed, fragile, like a ghost of the woman who'd left me 5 years ago. Vanessa's treatment lasted 9 months. 9 months of Teresa and I living in limbo, our marriage real but not legal, our future uncertain. Dennis kept the divorce papers ready, waiting for the day Vanessa would be declared in remission and would sign. I visited Vanessa a handful of times during those months, always brief, always awkward. She'd thank me, apologize, promise she'd sign as soon as she could. Teresa never asked me about those visits. She'd just hug me when I got home and hold on a little longer than usual. In October 2014, almost a year after Vanessa's diagnosis, her oncologist declared her cancer-free. The tumors were gone. She'd need monitoring for 5 years, but for now, she was in remission. I called Dennis immediately. "Get the papers ready," I said. "It's time." Dennis drew up the final divorce decree. We scheduled a meeting at his office for a Friday afternoon. Vanessa agreed to come. Teresa wanted to be there, but I asked her not to. "This is something I need to do alone," I said. She nodded, though I could see the hurt in her eyes. Vanessa showed up 15 minutes late. She'd lost weight during the treatment, and her hair, what had grown back, was short and gray. She looked older than 41. She looked like she'd been through a war. Dennis laid the papers out on the conference table. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "these are the final divorce documents. By signing, you're agreeing to a clean separation with no claims on Mr. Hayes' assets, no spousal support, and no further contact except in emergencies. Do you understand?" Vanessa picked up the pen. Then she set it down. "Can I say something first?" she asked, looking at me. I nodded, though every part of me wanted to say no. She took a deep breath. "Marcus, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed what we had, and I know I made your life hell when you were just trying to be happy. But you saved my life. Even after everything I did to you, you saved my life. And I need you to know that I see that. I see what kind of man you are. And I'm sorry I didn't see it when we were married." I sat there not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to tell her she'd wasted 5 years of my life with her selfishness and bitterness. But another part of me, the part Teresa had nurtured back to life, just felt tired. "Vanessa," I said, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was killing me. I was so angry after you left. Angry at you, at God, at myself. And that anger was eating me alive. Teresa taught me that forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself. So I forgive you, but I also need you to sign those papers and let me move forward with my life." She nodded, tears running down her face. "I will," she said. "I promise." She picked up the pen and signed. Every page. Every line. When she was done, Dennis collected the papers and said, "I'll file these with the court on Monday. The divorce will be final in 30 days. Vanessa stood up, looked at me one last time and said, "Be happy, Marcus, you deserve it." Then she left. I sat in that conference room for a long time after she was gone, just staring at the empty chair where she'd been sitting. Dennis put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." I drove home and found Teresa in the garden, pulling weeds even though it was October and everything was dying back for winter. I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. "It's done," I said. She signed. Teresa turned around, her eyes searching my face. "Really?" I nodded. "We'll be legally married in 30 days. She started crying. Not sad crying, happy crying, relief crying. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I was so scared I was going to lose you." I kissed her forehead. "You're never going to lose me," I said. "Never." That night we celebrated. Nothing fancy, just takeout from the Chinese place down the street and a bottle of wine we'd been saving. We ate on the couch, watching some old movie neither of us was paying attention to, just happy to be together, happy to finally be free. 30 days later, in November 2014, the divorce was finalized. I got a copy of the decree in the mail, and I showed it to Teresa. "It's official," I said. "Vanessa and I are divorced." Teresa looked at the paper, then at me. "What do we do now?" she asked. I smiled. "Now we get married. Again. The right way." We had a ceremony in December, just a small thing at the church with Pastor Williams officiating. My sister Lorraine was there, Teresa's sons, a few close friends. This time it was legal. This time there were no ghosts hanging over us. When Pastor Williams said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," I kissed Teresa like it was the first time all over again. Like we were starting brand new, because in a way, we were. We'd been through hell together, betrayal, illness, legal battles, uncertainty, and we'd come out the other side stronger. That's what love is. Not the fairy tale kind that's easy and perfect, but the kind that survives fire and comes out forged in steel. I don't know what happened to Vanessa after the divorce. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to Delaware to live with an aunt. I heard she was doing okay, staying healthy, maybe even working again. I hope that's true. I hope she found some kind of peace, not for her sake, but for mine. Because I learned something through all of this. You can't hold on to bitterness and hold on to love at the same time. You have to choose. And I chose love. Every single day, I choose love. Teresa and I are still together. I'm 72 now. She's 75. We've got aches and pains, gray hair, all the things that come with getting old. But we've also got each other. We've got Sunday mornings on the porch, Wednesday dinners with family, Friday nights watching game shows and arguing about the answers. We've got a life, a real life, the kind I didn't think I'd have after the accident, the kind I thought I'd lost when Vanessa walked away. But I didn't lose it. I found it. Or maybe it found me. If there's anything I want you to take from my story, it's this. Your past doesn't have to define your future. The people who hurt you don't get to write the ending of your story. You do. I could have stayed bitter. I could have stayed angry. I could have let Vanessa's betrayal turn me into someone hard and closed off. But I didn't. Because Teresa showed me another way. She showed me that love isn't something you fall into once and it's done. Love is something you choose. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And if you keep choosing it, if you keep showing up for the people who show up for you, then one day you'll wake up and realize you're happy. Really happy. Not because everything's perfect, but because you built something real with someone who stayed. That's what peace is. Not the absence of trouble, but the presence of someone who won't leave when trouble comes. I found that. And if I could find it after everything I went through, then you can find it too. I believe that. I have to believe that. Because hope is the thing that keeps us alive. So that's my story. The woman who left, the woman who stayed, the man who walked in ways than one. Comment below if this moved you. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to choose between bitterness and love. I read every comment because you're not just watching my story. We're all living our own versions of it. And maybe, just maybe, knowing you're not alone makes the hard days a little easier. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, peace don't come cheap, but it's worth every fight it takes to get there. I'm living proof of that. If you love this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I've got more stories to tell. Stories about betrayal, redemption, family secrets, and second chances. Drop a comment telling me what story I should tell next. And remember, your past doesn't define you. Your choices do. Choose love, choose forgiveness, choose peace. I'll see you in the next one.